I am Ginger Russell, and I didn't write a speech, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit of history and how I got here today. In 2013, I just like to say I educated my kids. They had went to public, private, and I homeschooled. I finished their education at home. They're college graduates now with kids of their own. I have 5 grandchildren. In 2013, my mom is science author Janice Van Cleve. She was tutoring some kids in one of the worst districts in the state, and that would be Marlin ISD. And she was tutoring some kids, and the kids didn't have a textbook. And so she said, where's your textbook? I said, well, we don't have one. And so Mom had done workshops at the education service centers across the state. And they knew her, you know, because she has written over 50+ science books. She's traveled the world, and she's pretty known, and she's done workshops at the ESCs. And so she went to the school and asked the teacher for some copies of the lessons because she had found something wrong with them. And they said, well, I'm sorry, I don't really think I'm supposed to give them out. But they did give her one. And somehow she got a hold of one and found it, you know, riddled with errors. So she wanted to see some more. They didn't want to give them to her. And since we went to the principal, they still didn't want to give them to her. Went to the Education Service Center in Waco and said, I'd like to speak with the C-Scope director, because that's the name of the online curriculum was C-Scope. And they said, she'll be right with you. Mom waited, and she waited, and she waited. Finally, she said, is the lady here? The lady had left the building, had went out the building, and when Mom showed up. And so here's where it started. So Mama found out it was created at ESC 13 in Austin. She contacted them and has a little bit of a redheaded temper like me, and she contacted them and said, I'm just going to write my own lesson and call it D-Scope, and we're going to pay $1 for it. I'm going to sell it for $1. And she wanted access to the material. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, and she calls me. I'm politically active. She wasn't at the time, and she said, Ginger, can you please help me? I said, sure, you know, and so I started digging around and found out what she had to say had some validity to it. And at this time, you know, I didn't even graduate from college. And she is looking at the content from a scientific standpoint with math and science, you know, and I don't have that background, and she's seeing things wrong with it. Well, I start digging around on Google, and I'm finding all is the Almighty God. And I get a password from somebody in the system who doesn't like the system. So I find some information about the Boston Tea Party being a terrorist act. And Glenn Beck picked it up. And then I just started finding lesson after lesson, kids having to climb the stairs to communism, a high school lesson of kids having to share baths in order to save water. I mean, progressive lesson after progressive, kids drawing new communist flags. A lot of role playing, a lot of subjective information, a lot of Islam material. So I started blowing the whistle on the content. That's what I understood. I didn't understand pedagogy at the time and how you teach children. That just wasn't my background. And so we had somebody else that was researching that, and I had somebody else that was researching the financial aspect of it. And at this time, they find out at ESC 13, the creators of the C-Scope, who my mom is. And they said, oh my. So they called her, said, Miss Van Cleve, can we drive up to Marlin and meet with you? And so they drove up to little podunk Marlin to meet with my mom, and I'm walking in with her, and I had been talking to them, but they didn't know we were mother and daughter. And Mom was walking in, and she grabs this limb off the ground outside, and I said, what are you doing? She goes, I got a plan. I said, okay, whatever, Mom, you know. So we get in this room, and we're sitting there for 3.5 hours with these ESC directors, Wade LeBy, and some other ones out of ESC 13. Anyway, to make a long story short, they're trying to sell this teaching philosophy to my mother. And she said, you know, like here, I got this stick outside with these beautiful leaves. They're changing colors. It's fall. She goes, today's a great day to teach this to my kids. Can I do that? No. You can call down, maybe the 3rd grade class is doing it this week. So in other words, they were telling them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And they had the professional development people come in and say that they stayed on task. And I'm really sort of clueless to some of all this right there. But I had the Islamic PowerPoint that I had found, and I'm sitting there, I go, what about this lesson right here? And they go, that's not in there. I said, well, it sure is. You pull it up. And so they pulled it up. They didn't pull it up with me there, but that week the lesson disappeared. And so what I did is almost for 2 years, I spent time going through content of the material. And I had my website, redhotconservative.com, and I would just start blasting different lessons every time. Kids climbing the stairs to communism, kids drawing in communist flags. I would put up a blog, go to Walmart, do whatever I had to do. I'd come home and the lesson would be gone. They would change it or they would edit it. So at this time, then and so it was just totally changing. I got a hold, David Dewhurst was the lieutenant governor at the time, and we went and met with him and sat down with the content of the C-scope material, and he said it was going into the it'll be in the 85th legislature. It's going into the 83rd in 2013. He said, we will have a Senate hearing on this, and Dan Patrick will chair the committee. We'll have a Senate hearing. Lights, camera, action is exactly what he told me. I think it's going to be pretty good. I've never done this before. So we're in this room, and it is packed, isn't it? And so, all these education service centers, people, there was a lot of money. I think they had to pitch in $200,000 for each ESC to form this collaborative. And they didn't even get permission from the state, or anyway, there's still $6 million missing that we haven't found. But anyway, we're having this Senate hearing, and Mom and I are sitting on the front row, and Dan Patrick's chairing it. It's looking really, really good. You know, I mean, he's hammering them. And at one point, he asked them, he said, can you come up there with that lesson for that new communist flag? And he said, oh, I don't have it. And I'm sitting on the front row. I said, oh, I have it. I'll give it to you. So he sat there on the table, and I said, here you go, Wade. And Wade LeBy was the director at the time. So he had to read that new lesson. He wasn't very happy with me right there. So anyway, but the sad thing about all that is Dan Patrick's, he looked good standing up there, and I'm just going to say it like it is. But behind the scenes, he made a deal with the education service centers and set off their sunset review to 2000, I believe it's 19. So while all this is going on and all this mess is going on, a state audit is called in to go through the financials, and $6 million is missing. He's grandstanding and looking good for calling it out on the carpet, but he's making a deal with the creators of it behind the doors. And I'm a delegate at the Texas State Republican Convention, and when Abbott was running, he said, we will get rid of C-scope, and the whole room just, yay, scream. Well, C-scope is still here. It's just renamed the TEACS
Resource Services.
I can't remember now.
TEACS Resource Services.
TEACS Resource Service. They just renamed it. The good thing about that aspect of it was all the lessons were removed. They had to change the name. A lot of people moved jobs or left jobs. It just was exposed for what it was. And through all of that, we found out it's a very subjective, it's not academics, it's more going towards the progressive teaching philosophy of social emotional learning and the goal of changing our society. And that's a little bit of history of C-scope. Anyway, that's been since 2013. And so I've just sort of stayed, not as involved as Alice, but paying attention to what's going on in education and watching like House Bill 5. And Senate Bill 6 is what got C-scope in the schools, because that let them do away with the review process of the textbooks, bypass the State Board of Education, and school districts can buy what they want. So Dan Patrick and Paxton and all of them signed on to that bill. So here we are right now in the 85th legislature, and they're running around pushing school choice because our schools are failing. They are failing. Well, legislators, you have set them up to fail. You have passed Senate Bill 6, you have passed House Bill 5, bill after bill you have passed that have set our kids up in the state of Texas to fail, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And we have begged, and we have worked, and we have tried to expose it for what it is, and we're more than willing to sit down and talk with them if they only cared. We really feel like they don't care. So they come into this legislative session, they're running around pushing school choice because kids deserve a better education. We have all these kids over here in these failing schools, but what they're doing is it's an access point for the kids that are in private school right now, and the homeschool kids. Homeschool, we have the best state to homeschool our kids in right now. We have no accountability as far as the state's concerned. I homeschooled mine, I love it. Anyway, if you start dallying the money carrot out, people are gonna start buying onto it, especially the people who are new to homeschooling because they don't realize the freedom that we have. And so Senate Bill 3 has been passed by Senator Larry Taylor. What's interesting about Senator Larry Taylor, him and Kel Segler, I think is his name, Senator Segler, Stacy Hope, and some other ones sat on the Texas Next Generation of Assessments and Accountability. They just hand their report over to the governor in September, their final report, asking the governor to align our state standards and accountability with that of the federal Every Student Succeeds Act. At the same time they're asking the governor to do that, they're filing a school choice bill because our kids are failing and we got to give them a choice. And they're just not consistent in how they portray it to the public and what they're doing. The school choice is to rein in all children. They want to get all children. If this bill were to pass here in Texas, it would be the first state in the nation that would give government subsidies to homeschool kids. And so you'll hear the option. It's optional. It's optional. That's not unacceptable. It's just a stepping stone to more government regulations, growing government, and creating another level of bureaucracy. So the TBO bills, the school choice ESA legislation, all these bills, they need to be stopped. They're not good. It's just increasing government, and it's to play off the backs and for our governor and Dan Patrick to get out there with the mantra of only the poor people have choices. It's just disgusting to me that they would play that class warfare card. And anyway, with that said, we started, when we realized what was going on, we figured the Texas Homeschool Coalition is behind Dan Patrick and all them pushing school choices. And I became aware of this after going to a conference by Patrick and a bunch of them. So I started listening, I started watching, I started looking at the finances, who's funding what, and the Texas Homeschool Coalition. A lot of their funders for their gala this year were Dan Patrick, Glenn Hagar, which is our Texas comptroller who would control the ESA funding. Dan Patrick, I'm sure Greg Evans in there somewhere. Anyway, there was quite a few people that are pushing school choice that funded Texas Homeschool Coalition for their gala this year. And as a homeschooler, I'm thinking Texas Homeschool Coalition is out to protect current homeschoolers right now. They're looking out for us. And those parents that are homeschooling right now, they're home homeschooling. They're not paying attention to this. And they're not looking out for us. And so I became aware of it, and I started Texans for Homeschool Freedom. I just started organizing it. We're just a little grassroots group, but just to wake parents up across the state of Texas as to what's going on and the threat that this legislation would have on their freedom. So we had a gathering today at the Capitol. We had a great turnout. We had folders for every rep in the legislator. We've had some reps come by and visit with us. And we had a great day, and I think that they're starting to recognize, and I'm hearing word that they're understanding that Texas Homeschool Coalition isn't speaking for all Texas homeschoolers like they once thought it was. Mm-hmm. And so there's a movement going on right now, and we're just asking our legislators to please listen to us, because we want liberty, we want freedom, and we want the ability to self-govern and educate our kids as we see fit as parents. Thank you so much.